Once upon a time, there was an unusual program called Surabhi. Actually, it wasn't so unusual, but the people made it so. Their response was truly unusual. Surabhi means fragrance. Inhale it and you get culture. But actually, it has more than 30 different meanings. If one looks at the Sanskrit original, it is the mythological name for Kamadhenu, the special cow of the gods, the granter of boons. Amul Surabhi was an apt title because it went on to become one of the defining programs of Indian television. It ran for 11 years on national television for no small reason that it received unstinted support from one of the great dairy cooperatives of the world, Amul, and its legendary chairman, Dr. V. Kurian. Many people undertook research papers on Surabhi to understand its popularity. Perhaps it touched a chord, awoke a sense of pride in India, in being Indian. Perhaps it was the anchor, Renuka Shahane's friendly smile, which became a household trademark. Perhaps it was its unexpectedly slick and entertaining style. Perhaps it was the credibility of the research and the scripting. Perhaps, most of all, it was the amazing revelations about India, its culture, its history, its people, its music, its crafts, its philosophy, all that. And this was reflected in the questions and the millions of answers that poured in week after week for the more than a decade that Surabhi was telecast on prime time as a top 10 show on the Doordarshan National Network of India.
सुरभि का प्रोग्राम बहुत पसंद।
जो वो लड़की है ना, क्या नाम उसका? उसका नाम क्या लड़की का? रेणुका। वो मेरी जैसी लगती है।
मुझे सुरभि अच्छा लगता है क्योंकि उसमें सब जनरल नॉलेज रहता है।
My aim is to travel and see India.
हम भी सुरभि का फैन हो गए।
People from the age of 8 to 80 watched the show in every part of India. You know, once I was in a jeep in the remote jungles of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and a woman gathering wood came onto the road. And she looked at me. Remember, this is in a forest, a deep forest. She looked at me, she smiled and pointed her finger. Surabhi. The program was popular. It won many awards of the time and even entered the Limca Book of Records for the longest running and most popular cultural television show of all time. I was blessed. So why was Surabhi so popular? After all, it was anchored by one slim, pretty woman and one rather stout man. I like to believe that every week we offered a new and startling insight into India in each episode. Something the people of India could go, wow, about themselves. And then, of course, there was Renuka's smile. In those days, there were no mobile phones, and letters and postcards were common. Believe it or not, sacks upon sacks of postcards were received in the post offices around India and sent to the Surabhi office. Do you know that one day we got an SOS from our local post office? They had run out of post bags. Imagine, in that 1 week, we had received 1.4 million letters, which were stuffed into 104 bags and took 3 trucks to deliver to the Surabhi office in Andheri West in Mumbai, where a temporary pavilion or a shamyana kind of thing had to be erected to store the postcards and select the winners. The post office complained. I don't blame it, since it had no postal sacks left and would run out of postcards and of its sacks every time a question was asked in Surabhi, which incidentally was every week. Eventually, the government of the day, the parliament, passed a law creating blue competition postcards, which were 10 times more expensive than the ordinary yellow postcards. So viewers of television shows like Surabhi could now send their replies only on the blue postcards. To my mind, this is the first and perhaps the only instance where Parliament has been invoked to regulate the supply of subsidized postcards to the public because of a TV show. But still, imagine, lakhs and lakhs of postcards would pour in every week. It was unbelievable.
जी, सुरभि के रिस्पांस डिपार्टमेंट में काम करने वाले
सभी लोग चिट्ठियों के ढेर में छुपे रहते हैं.
I don't know why, but I think Surabhi as a program was easy to understand. We had to simplify the Hindi before we spoke it so we could understand it ourselves. And then there was Renuka Shahani's 1000-watt smile that lit up the screen. Few people know that Renuka actually stopped smiling early on in the program. Do you know why? A noted film critic, Amita Malik of the Times of India, criticized her for behaving as if she was in a toothpaste ad, smiling all the time. And so from the next episode, Renuka stopped smiling. Oh gosh. I had to reassure Renuka that the people loved the program because of her smile. Luckily, soon Renuka's charming smile was back in full force to charm the viewers, and Amita Malik herself eventually forgave her and became a big fan of Surabhi. Every episode of Surabhi had some amazing revelation in it about India, about its history, about its people or its culture. This is a revelation for us too. For instance, which World Heritage Monument has the ability to play music? Can you guess? Who are the Shompens? Where do they live? Do you know? What was the first ever song of Indian cinema? Have you ever heard it? How was distance measured in ancient times? Today cars and scooters travel without any difficulty, but in ancient times, what was the measurement of distance? Do stones have a male and female gender? I mean, is there a male stone and a female stone? How come? And do we know that the rules of democracy were written in stone more than 1000 years ago in a place called Uttaramerur in Tamil Nadu? I shall of course answer some of these questions in the course of my talk, but through Surabhi's enjoyable question and answer sessions, an entire generation, including myself and Renuka, became acquainted with its own culture and ethos. As I said, so did we. One of the greatest opportunities that Surabhi gave me was the opportunity to travel and discover my own country. Remember, I was a public school educated WOG, as they say it, Western Oriental gentleman as they called them in those days, who had left his home in Kashmir without properly learning the local language and whose knowledge of Hindi was limited to Hindi film songs. But Surabhi changed all that. Books have been written about India. Learned debates are held on India by scholars. Very often the subject of these debates, the people of India themselves, are unaware of what the fuss is about. What makes India great? And how do they happen to be part of it? And this is the beauty and charm of India. It is unaware of its greatness and indeed what makes it great. It is all part of the unconscious living of life. And that is the beauty of it. These principles have just been in existence for thousands of years. There are these memorable words about Gandhiji in the classic film on him made by Richard Attenborough, spoken by the American photographer Margaret Bourke-White, played by Candice Bergen. Do you remember those words? She remarks towards the end of the film as she watches him walk away, and in fact it's just before he's shot, dead. There goes a man who has found a way to change the world, but neither he knows it nor does the world. And this is true of India as well. Perhaps it's not aware about how great it is. It just lives. But the world is getting to know. Through our TV show, Surabhi, I was privileged to glimpse the diversity and uniqueness of the India that we call Bharat, and discover its astonishing diversity and realize the depths and value of its unique legacies of life existing side by side in one composite culture.
Ganga is the only river mythologized linked to the three gods, Trinity. So that's why she is considered to be the symbol of life.
an elephant dies, people will go and put flowers. It's Ganesh. Yeah? Even if the elephant is a damaged crop, even then they will go and put flowers.
લીલગાયનું આજ 2 વર્ષથી કીધું છે કે ગમે ત્યાં ભડાકા દઈ દો, તો કોઈ આ ભાલના એરિયામાં કોઈ લીલગાયને મારવા તૈયાર નથી.
One key insight for me was that in Bharat, life and art are interconnected. You know, while making the lak pot, the potter plays the flute. And while painting on the wall, it is a celebration of birth or marriage within those walls. So art is not divorced from life. Similarly, examples from life helped in evolving a code of measurements. You know, let me tell you now how measurement was there in the old days of the mile, of the course as they would call it. The course, or approximately a mile, was evolved around the 16th century. It was said that the course represents the distance a cow may wander if left alone to graze for a day. Beautiful. Thus, course minars were set up by the edict of the Emperor Akbar along the Grand Trunk Road for the comfort of travellers. You can still see a few remaining course minars on the outskirts of Delhi. Fascinating witnesses to centuries of history and the laden caravans that used to pass along the route. The story is, and it's an interesting one for this day and age, that the caravansarais, or the resting houses which had to be booked for the passing caravans and their horses and their cattle, had a strict rule. What was that? After every caravan pass, they were not to accept any booking for at least a week. And why is that? This was to allow the grass around the caravanserai to grow in order to feed the horses and cattle accompanying the next procession. Now, this seems an interesting principle in today's instant online booking world. There, you couldn't book something for 2 weeks. So, India poses as many questions as it offers answers. Here, by the edge of a lake, Jayanti Bhai comes of an evening and calls out to his beloved tortoises. It is a plaintive call. Ow, ow, and one by one the tortoises, ow. They clamber out of the water, grab the proffered tidbit, and they leave. So do they hear Jayanti Bhai? Who knows? But they certainly do respond, because this is India. Then there is the incredible story of Prakash Amte and the animals he loves. He and his family live together in harmony with the animals they have reared in the jungles of Chandrapur in Maharashtra, where they have set up a hospital for the tribal community. The animals also coexist. Their Pekingese dog and the great leopard travel together for their monthly bath in the river. It's an amazing sight. They play together. What happened to the leopard's instinct to eat the dog? Even the humans around it, for instance. Is it something in the air? Who knows? For this is India. It is the home of coexistence. My favorite coexistence story is when we were filming the protected lions in the Gir forests of Junagadh in Gujarat. When one of the lions fell ill, the sanctuary hospital needed an X-ray. Perhaps its own machine was out of order, something like that. But imagine what actually happened. The lion was tranquilized and dispatched for an X-ray to the local clinic of Dr. Sunil Patel. Now imagine the scene. Here is a normal X-ray clinic in the heart of the city with people queuing up for their X-rays. Suddenly, a lion, a wild lion, arrives in their midst for an X-ray on the very same X-ray table they have just been occupying. It must have been a shock. I must say the citizens took it in their stride though. They vacated the X-ray room and the lion duly got his X-ray and our cameraman duly took his shots. Until the lion, still on the table, opened one eye like that. Have you ever experienced a wild lion suddenly opening his eye and looking straight at you? My gosh. Our cameraman bolted and only returned after the accompanying doctor quickly administered an additional tranquilizer. and the lion fell asleep again. I believe that this is the first time that any film crew has filmed a wild lion on a city X-ray table. You know, it can only happen in India. Nor can I ever forget our filming in a small village near the Nal Sarovar bird sanctuary of Kutch. A pelican with a broken wing had been nursed back to health by the local village people, but it could no longer fly. It used to stroll around the village in a proprietary way, ticking off all and sundry, the stray dogs, the cows, even taking time off for catch practice with the local cricket crazy kids, believe it or not, making it the only pelican cricket coach in the world. As I said, it can only happen in India. Another insight is that India is really the home of democracy. Remember I said 1000 years ago in Uttaramerur and Tamil Nadu, some stone tablets recorded the rules of a cooperative society that could be the essence of a democratic nation today. For instance, let me tell you some of the rules. If you wish to stand for the village election 1000 years ago, you must be educated. Your age should not be less than 35 or more than 70 years because these are the best years of your experience and your wisdom. You must have some property of your own. If you can't look after your own property, how will you look after that of the village? Your house should be on your own land and your wealth should not be illegal. Marvelous things. No contestant can stand for a post more than twice to give others a chance. If you haven't given proper accounts, you can't stand for elections. No people of criminal intent are allowed to stand for any election. Now, these are the stone inscriptions of Uttaramerur. 1000 years ago, the following rules were laid down for the disqualification of a candidate. Alcoholism is a sin, as are immoral relations, murder, loot and robbery, and bribe taking. Not only that, all the relatives of a disqualified candidate are prohibited from standing for elections for the next 7 generations. Imagine if that rule were to be in operation today. It would clean up the system. While selecting a winning candidate, votes were kept in a pot in a public place and drawn by an innocent child, a bit like the winners of the Surabhi quiz contest itself on this show, and transparent. There is a special genius in this idea of Bharat, of interconnectedness, where even mathematics can be expressed in terms of interconnectedness. So what do I mean by this? Here is a page from the manuscript of the book Leelavati of the great mathematician Bhaskaracharya, written in the 12th century. It is said that Leelavati was written to explain the principles of mathematics to his daughter, called Leelavati. We had the privilege of filming an Odissi dance ballet on Leelavati, directed by dancer Jhelam Paranjpe, for one of the episodes of Surabhi. There is also the fascinating earlier interpretation by the legendary dancer Chandralekha, another example of the interconnectedness of all things in India. So there was one classic question which was asked in verse 152 of Leelavati. So there is a snake hole, says Bhaskaracharya to his attentive daughter Leelavati, at the foot of a pillar 9 cubits or hastas high, and a peacock is perched on its summit, right on top. Now the peacock sees a snake at a distance of thrice the pillar, that is around 27 cubits, gliding towards its hole. The peacock pounces obliquely upon the snake. So Bhaskaracharya says, say quickly, Leelavati, at how many cubits or hastas from the snake's hole does the peacock catch the snake, assuming both are proceeding at the same speed? There is of course an equation that symbolizes how this mathematical puzzle is solved by dividing the square of the pillar by the distance between the snake and the hole. It sounds perhaps a bit complicated, but the answer is the snake will be 12 cubits or hastas away from the hole when the snake catches it. Now equations may be boring, but the way the questions are put and the answers are given, it must have been fascinating for a little girl who lived 1000 years ago. And that is why perhaps she became a famous mathematician herself. So now it's time to answer some of the other questions I asked in the beginning. Which was the heritage monument that can play music? Can you guess? Yes, Hampi, the musical pillars of Hampi. Which was the first song of Indian cinema that was ever played, and that was De De Khuda ke naam pe pyare, De De Khuda ke naam, sung by W.M. Khan. And who are the Shaumpens? Where do they live? The Shaumpens are a vanishing tribe in the Andaman Islands. When we met them, they had never seen a camera, and they are hardly in touch with the human race, except themselves and their own people.
All of me is on fire. My voice, my body, my hands. I tremble with the need to express. Out of the earth, I celebrate. Out of the skies comes my answer. Out of the earth, I create his body. Out of space, his abode. This bounty and this beauty is my source. My body is the instrument of my expressions.
Another key insight into India is that the essence of spirituality pervades our arts and crafts. There are really no paintings which are created to be hung on the wall as in the Western world. Paintings are made directly on the walls of a house to commemorate an auspicious occasion or as a blessing to a newly married couple. Art, after all, is a celebration of life. The word Shilp was used by Panini, the great grammarian of the 5th century, as an all-inclusive word. It denoted all kinds of artists and artisans, from potters and weavers or tailors, painters, dancers and musicians. These Shilpakars and all the art they create or perform represented the soul of India. We are who we are. Our civilization is distinctive because of our traditions, our dances, our folk forms, our infinite styles of craft and weaving, the use of a myriad materials from stone to wood to lak to metal to ivory, creating art governed by the cycles and rhythms of life, of nature, of harvests, and the profound cultural, religious, and social diversities across the nation. Something that we learned week after week during the telecast of Surabhi. History, wars, migrations have resulted in thousands of crafts across a country of over 1.3 billion people, of which about 50% live in rural areas, resulting in about 25 million craftsmen in different craft sectors and more than 1,000 craft clusters across India. Crafts are our country's DNA, our IPR. Crafts are a livelihood with enormous emotional and cultural connections. Crafts and culture are the Bharatiyata of Bharat, are the Indianness of India. Down in Kerala, in a small village called Aranmula, I discovered a miraculous craft of making mirrors from metal. The secret is preserved only with one family, the Acharis, who do not reveal the special blend of tin, copper and other metals that makes the metal so shiny. You can see your face in it. It requires a lot of rubbing, of course, but it reflects the innovation and industriousness with which craft is practiced in India. For instance, deep in the forests of Bastar, you can find a quaint process of sculpture called the lost wax process. Have you heard of it? You know, this consists of first making a model of the object in clay, then putting a layer of wax over the clay model, followed by another layer of clay. Finally, molten metal is poured in from a hole in the head, which melts all the wax, which gets replaced by the metal. Once the metal cools, the mold is broken, the object is revealed in all its beauty. My colleague and the great folklorist Jyotindra Jain gave me this remarkable insight about craft. I remember it till this day. For one thing, he said, craft is abstract. It is not limited by the normal constraints of time and space. Objects are not proportionate, and as in a Phad painting used by traditional storytellers, time and space are eclipsed as the story leaps from one scene to another and for another. And he told me, and I have never forgotten this, no two objects are alike. Every object is an original and therefore can be considered a masterpiece. This is unlike much of European craft, which is often produced on an assembly line. So the world may have the most advanced vocational training systems, but India has a syllabus for carpet weaving at Kashmir University. I also learned why the carpet weavers of Kashmir sing or recite while weaving the carpets. I discovered that this is in order to remember the complicated mathematical calculations required in weaving the knots in the carpets. This ancient art is slowly declining across India, and I was surprised to learn that one of the elements in its revival has been a weaving device that allows the skilled artisan to sit on a chair, like me, to weave the carpet instead of on the floor, which today, in the context of modern factory work, is considered demeaning by young people. But remember, in Surabhi, Renuka and I used to sit on the floor. But anyone wishing to participate in transforming the traditional skills of India with more modern processes needs to be sensitive to these values and complexities while planning change. Our arts are unique worldwide and constitute the soul of India. Consider the art of coconut climbers of the south who harvest all those coconuts we love to eat. Coconut climbing is a dying art or profession. The sons of coconut climbers don't want to climb trees. It's too risky and it's too, what should I say, it's too undignified. So the only way to revive this dying vocation is to go and study at a coconut climbing college in Kerala, to try out new climbing and safety gadgets for climbing coconut trees and take part in coconut climbing competitions. Even women have joined as professional coconut climbers. Where there is a coconut, there is a way. Of course, these relationships are changing all the time, and new relationships are now being formed directly between creators and their customers as opposed to the whole community. Earlier, a folk group would perform in a village and be compensated in kind in terms of rice and rations. But now you can book a folk troupe directly. They will perform only for you. You can now buy a Madhubani painting and just hang it on your wall to match your sofa if you like. It was never like that before because it celebrated life. The nature of connectedness has changed, of course, but the impulse is the same. Even today, there are places in India where everyone is still a craftsperson. For instance, in Tamil Nadu, women use the art of kolam as a daily ritual of cleaning and decorating their homes and their welcoming guests. Many parts of rural India still use the art of lipai for plastering the walls of their homes with a layer of wet mud and cow dung. Wet mud and cow dung with their hands, leaving the artistic imprint of their hands on the wall as they apply the mixture. Art and life are interconnected in India. The idea of India, of Bharat, is incomplete without an insight into its incredible variety of food, believe me, some of which has taken over the fancy of the international palate. I believe chicken tikka masala rules Europe, doesn't it? One aspect is the infinite variety based on local produce and geography, cultural habits and history. India is what it eats, and you can deduce its ingenuity in artistry just by tasting a South Indian sadhya served on a leaf, or a North Indian biryani topped with caramelized onions, or a dal bati churma of Western India garnished with jaggery, or the river water fish of Bengal served in a spicy curry. I can go on and on. The making of these dishes is not governed by recipes which vary from region to region, place to place. Many are made by comparatively unlettered rural folk, by experience, by the oral tradition handed down through families and friends, by the look of the dish as it cooks. They don't read recipes. Just by smelling the food, cooking, listening to the sizzle of the tadka, or stirring the dal to judge the texture, or looking at the way the rajma has browned in the utensil is the evidence needed by most grandmothers to cook that perfect dish. Even the cooking and eating of food, the way it is served all together, its sight, smell, taste, touch, reflects the interconnectedness of the many elements that make up the idea of India. And there are elaborate rules for serving the food on a banana leaf, and equally detailed rules of hospitality, which are the essence of the philosophy of Atithi Devo Bhava. The guest is equivalent to God. Here are some of those rules made nearly 5,000 years ago. Every item placed on the leaf has its exact position and its ritual eating order. For example, salt and pickle are on the left-hand side of the leaf, rice and ghee in the center, and where are the vegetables, dal and the payasam? They're on the right-hand side. And papad, vadas and banana chips, all the fried things are right on top. Guests on arrival are to be ceremoniously received and given water for washing, and then offered the auspicious ritual beverage madhuparka, consisting of ghee, curd, milk, honey and sugar. Wow! Food is never to be eaten standing up or lying down or moving about. And here is something interesting. One has to eat sitting on the ground facing east or north and in total silence. The host is expected to see to the feeding of the guests, any pregnant women, children and aged persons in the house, for he himself sits down to eat. Quite demanding, these rules. Imagine applying them to a party today.
अचिंत अव्यक्त रूपाय निर्गुणाय गुणात्मने समस्त जगदाधार मूर्तये ब्रजणे नमः.
You know, we were lucky to be present when the master sculptor, the late Shilpa Guru Ganapati Sthapati ji, selected stones for making the images of Shiva and Parvati. For him, and this was a new experience for me, stones had a male or female gender depending on the sound they made when tapped. Interesting.
We call it male sound.
Deep sounds were male, and they could also be used for beams and plinths, such stones. Light sounds were female, and these stones could also be used for decorative work. Ganapati Sthapati ji said that the process of creation begins when the sculptor becomes one with the sculpture. When we discover that we are the inheritors of such a spiritually profound legacy, it radically alters one's view of the world and of oneself and of all artistic creation. Imagine the scientific knowledge that led to the musical pillars of Hampi, made of a certain composition of granite that produced the sounds of Sani, Dhapa, Maga, Resa when struck, or the perfection of the Taj, one of the wonders of the world, or the great temples of Belur and Halibid, World Heritage Monuments, where the humble sculptors inscribed their names on stone to immortalize their achievements, which thousands gather to wonder and worship to this day. But why science only in grand gestures? You can see it in the simple, effective science of the folk toys of rural India, a diminishing art, unfortunately, based on simple scientific principles, such as the center of gravity, or heat due to friction, atmospheric pressure, or persistence of vision, all, by the way, made by simple rural folk, often unlettered, uneducated, displaying great practical wisdom. Centrifugal force, for instance, is illustrated by the jigging puppet. When the central support is twisted, the arms and legs make swift movements like a dancer, a clown, or a warrior. Folk toy based on scientific principles. And one study carried out by the passionate researcher and documenter of folk toys, Sudarshan Khanna of the NID, suggested that these scientific toys could be revived if they could be used in classroom study to understand simple science at little or no cost, and would also connect the urban child to her rural sister. What a marvelous idea, and how easy to implement. Equally interesting is how ice was made in India before the refrigerator was invented. Can anyone guess how? And we asked the question in one of the episodes of Surabhi. This was the answer. Listen. An English judge recorded a description of ice making in Allahabad in 1775. This was by the overnight cooling of water during the 3 winter months when the temperature was close to freezing point. Boiled water was poured a couple of centimeters deep into small, shallow, porous vessels, and the latter placed in shallow pits, well insulated at the bottom and the sides, that had been scooped out in the ground in quiet and windless surroundings. Overnight, ice would form, and this was collected and kept in insulated pits. The British expanded the technique, and a century later were making, believe it or not, 20 to 30 tons of ice in one night and storing it for use all the year round. That's ingenuity. In fact, visiting the great monuments of India is an unforgettable experience. Surrounded by history and monumental architecture, one can't help but wonder about the great civilization which once existed here and which is no more. Who built these amazing structures? And how? How are these tons of stone transported and lifted? Held by the simplest of mortar or by gravity, without nails, without joints, steel or any other support? How have these huge structures lasted for not just 100 or 200 years, but a mind-boggling 1,000 or 2,000 years? And these monuments hide within them such mysteries of science and architecture that baffles the imagination. Imagine the Virupaksha temple at Hampi in South India, where you can see an inverted shadow of the Gopuram inside the temple when the sun strikes a special crevice on the wall. And you have just heard the sound of those musical pillars of Hampi. How did they figure this out thousands of years ago? My favorite monument mystery story is about the Taj. I visited it first many years ago when we were still permitted to enter the inner sanctum within the mausoleum, where the tombs of the great Emperor Shah Jahan and his beloved consort Mumtaz Mahal jostle for space. I say, believe me, I say jostle for space because given the perfection of the Taj Mahal in every respect, from its layout, its decorative elements, its gardens, there is perfect symmetry. But here, where the tombs lie side by side, there is shocking asymmetry. And in fact, very little space to cross by the side of one of the tombs. This has given rise to many fables. One of the most researched and meticulous is that of my friend Iftikhar Nadeem Arshi, who surmises that a black Taj was supposed to have been built to house the tomb of Shah Jahan himself across the river, separating the pure white marble Taj, the wonder of this world, where lay the love of his life, Mumtaz Mahal. The two Tajes were to be connected by a bridge. And in fact, there are the remnants of a garden called Mehtab Bagh on the opposite bank, which suggests that perhaps there was a plan to replicate the white marble Taj in black marble across the river. Even the great traveller Bernier has referred to it in his writings, and Iftikhar Nadeem Arshi Sahib, who has dedicated his life, really so much of his life, to creating an exact miniature replica of the Black Taj, has written a very interesting book about it. But the Black Taj was not to be. Imprisoned by his son Aurangzeb, Shah Jahan died a lonely death gazing out from the ramparts of the Agra fort at the ethereal white marble Taj, where lay his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal. And when Shah Jahan died, his remains were interred next to hers. But her tomb was already in the center, and he was placed by her side in an unceremonious and asymmetrical burial of convenience in the absence of a mausoleum of his own. This is a tragic story, perhaps, of history. And we all love a love story, and what a love story this is. What striking visuals and poignant grandeur. Just imagine, in the moonlight, a pristine white Taj gleaming, while across the dark moon-flecked water stands a dark, forbidding alter ego of the white Taj in black marble. If it had been built, perhaps the two Tajes together would not be just one of the 7 wonders of the world, but I think perhaps the only one, don't you think? Now we are going into different territory. Another strange place that I visited is the Kala Dungar temple in Kutch in Gujarat, not far from the border with Pakistan. The temple is situated way up on the top of a hill. It's a rather lonely hill full of rocks and stunted trees. All around, as far as the eye can see, are the endless salt pans, where no human being can last for more than a day under the blazing sun. Kala Dungar is quite a desolate place, and one really doesn't wish to linger here for longer than necessary. But there is a site here at Kala Dungar for which many who come to visit the temple linger in the evening to see. And this is the unbelievable sight of jackals emerging from the hidden crevices of the rocky hills to partake of the rice prasad, or the sacred offering, after the evening prayers at the temple. It may well be that these jackals are now used to responding to the drumming sound that signals the offering of the prasad, as that may well be the only food that they can be sure of in the entire day. But still, it is an uncanny sight to see them emerging like phantoms from nowhere and then melting back once again into the barren and rocky landscape. Where do they go? Now they are invisible. It is a chilling sight, and one that can never be forgotten. One is hard put to explain some of these phenomena, but it is a fact that India is full of such stories and legends. One legend is that of the Bhrigu Samhita, or the Book of the Future, in which it is said that the future of each person who lives in the world is written on its palm leaves, even to the point where that person will come to ask for his or her future to be told. Incredible. As the legend goes, Bhrigu Maharishi went to meet Lord Vishnu, and when he found him asleep, he kicked him in anger, thinking he was avoiding him. Now this annoyed Vishnu's consort Lakshmi, who cursed the Bhrigu, saying he and his community will always be poor. But Vishnu, who was magnanimous, advised the Bhrigu, if he could calculate the past, present and future of the population of the entire world, then he and his entire Pandit community could forever earn a living. So the Bhrigu Samhita still earns its interpreters a living today. 50 years ago, as a child, I was taken by my parents to one such interpreter of the Bhrigu Samhita. Now I can't remember what he said, but I do recall that he had a small shop in a busy street in Hoshiarpur in northern India, and he showed me where it was written that I was to come. Now half a century later, here I was filming in another part of Hoshiarpur with Mata Sneha Amritananda, who has thousands of followers around the world. The leaves of the Bhrigu Samhita are scattered all over India and are guarded with great care by those who are lucky enough to have found or inherited some of those remaining pages. The devotion and belief that people have in the Bhrigu Samhita, including my parents, is quite astonishing. A lot, I think, has to do with the power of the mind. And it happened to me. As a child, while I was trekking in Ladakh, I belong to Kashmir, I happened to pick up a penance stone which had the words Om Mane Padma Hom inscribed on it. It is a sacred mantra to bless one's life. Om, the sacred sound. Mani or jewel. Bead, talisman. Padma or lotus flower. And Hum, the spirit of entitlement. So I brought this penance stone home and I kept it in my living room in Srinagar. I was very proud of it. Many people were fascinated by it. But I found that I was suddenly going through a phase of bad luck. And my mother told me I should have had this stone blessed by a local priest before taking it. And so my bad luck persisted. So one day I finally asked my revered and learned grandfather, Pandit Ramchandra Kak, who was formerly a Director General of Archaeology and a former Prime Minister of Kashmir, what should I do? And learned man that he was, full of knowledge and experience and wisdom, he said gently to me, these things happen. Go up to the sacred Shankaracharya hill and leave the stone there. So a bit shamefaced at my arrogance, I did as I was told. From that day, my bad luck ended. Was it a coincidence? Or was it for real? One will never know. The truth is that there is much more to life than meets the eye, And you can experience that quite vividly in India. It's not difficult to believe that the maximum number of applications to the Guinness Book of World Records come from India. Even the most ordinary of people can boast of the most extraordinary of achievements. Pulling a ship by the hair, or trucks with their teeth, eating fluorescent lights, or just hundreds of chilies in 5 minutes is something that can only happen in India. Our people have an irresistible desire to do the impossible. Believe it or not, I saw with my own eyes 39 people in that small car. And the car also moved for about 100 yards with those 39 people inside. So I would like to introduce you to some of the wonderful people I met while filming. Simple people, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. For instance, the Sen brothers of Kolkata, who were extraordinary shadow play artists. We have all heard of classical music played on a sitar or a sarod or a shahnai. Have you heard of classical music created by whistling? In fact, why do you need an instrument at all to play music if you can play music using a leaf? Have you ever tried it? It's an extraordinary traditional art perfected in India. In fact, that was one leaf. Imagine an orchestra that is using many leaves to create music. And this could only happen in India, where often necessity is the mother of invention. Do you know that even a saw, an ari, by which you cut wood, can create wonderful music? The one and only Eric Lopez could do that and even taught his daughter Dagmar the art. What an astonishing art. There is something extraordinary about the connection that the people of India have with music, from birth to death. We are all connected to some form of music, and we have even found ways to play wind instruments, meaning instruments that you have to blow on, without blowing on them. Have you heard of the Nastarang? You know, it's a wind instrument which is played not by blowing, but by pressing the chords of the throat. I can't imagine how it is done. Now, people say that the first musical instrument in the world was the burindo of Kutch. It is a simple egg-shaped instrument with a few strategic holes in it. And you know how the idea of the burindo came to the people of Kutch? They would hear the constant desert wind blowing through the half-eaten fruits on some of the trees, and they produced a strange heavenly music hundreds of years ago. And that discovery, they say, resulted in the burindo, the first musical instrument, they say, in the world. Amazing. And this leads to what I believe is the distinguishing factor that sets the idea of India, the idea of Bharat, apart from the rest of the world. The spirit of wonder, of innovation and ingenuity that governs our everyday life. I believe it is the Indian ability to prove that necessity is the mother of invention, that jugaad, a very typically Indian innovative word, is not such a bad thing after all. And that the ferment of ideas we are witnessing in India today is in fact due to the spirit of that jugaad. Whether it is the all bamboo cycle and even the bamboo dentures and earrings created by enterprising individuals in Assam, the Nano Ganesh invention in Pune using a mobile to drive a distant water pump to overcome irregular power fluctuations, and to the startup IT revolution that is sweeping the country. The idea of India is not built on a formula, but on an understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And this is a unique idea. that serves as the fountainhead of all ideas and distinguishes India as a nation of living philosophy. India affects people in different ways. It has affected me in a different way. It can be infuriating, it can be intoxicating, it can be maddening, and it can be unforgettable. So when I began my TV show on Indian culture, I was often asked, and I used to wonder. They used to say, how long can you continue? Haven't you covered everything that has to be covered? Well, I had no idea myself, because I knew so little. But as I continued week after week, year after year, door after door opened, revealing India's infinite universe and confirming to me that indeed after so many years, I really knew nothing. I've been able to give you a glimpse, however inadequate, of all that I really do not know about the wonder that is India. Hopefully it will spark a journey of discovery by you more successful than I could ever have experienced. For truly, India is inexhaustible. And the best part is, it belongs to whoever loves her. Really, it belongs to you and to me. As the great sage Kabir in the 15th century once said, "Is ghat antar baag bagiche इसी में सिरजनहारा, इस घट अंतर 7 समुंदर इसी में 9 लख तारा, इस घट अंतर पारस मोती इसी में परखनहारा, इस घट अंतर अनहद गरजे इसी में उठत फुहारा। कहत कबीर सुनो भाई साधो, इसी में साईं हमारा।